U.S. Southern Command deployed 3 helicopters, 2 UH-60 Black Hawk aircraft, and 1 CH-47 Chinook helicopter.
Hegseth claimed that China's control of critical infrastructure in the canal area gave Beijing the power to conduct spying activities across Panama.
My administration will be reclaiming the Panama Canal, and we've already started doing it.
Defense Pete Hegseth has previously expressed concerns about China's expanding military and economic presence within the Western Hemisphere.
What if I told you the Panama Canal could become the ultimate chessboard in a high-stakes game between 2 global superpowers? This isn't just about trade routes anymore. This is about influence, helicopters, and a silent power move aimed directly at China. Stick around, because Southern Flow Shield 2025 wasn't your typical military exercise.
Its primary objective was to strengthen preparedness against potential threats to the security of the Panama Canal and other critical infrastructure.
Quick favor before we move on. If you appreciate this content, consider giving this video a like and subscribing to the channel. Believe it or not, more than 92% of viewers haven't subscribed yet. It's free and only takes a second, but it means the world to us. So, did you subscribe already? Great, thank you so much for your support. Now back to the video. The Panama Canal, just 82 kilometers long, but responsible for transporting about 5% of all global maritime trade every single day. That little ribbon of water saves ships the trouble of a nearly 13,000 kilometer detour around South America's Cape Horn. It's not just a canal, it's practically a conveyor belt for the international economy. And in a world that thrives on speed and efficiency, this canal is an artery that every major power wants to keep flowing, or control. For the United States, the Panama Canal has always been more than an engineering marvel. It's not just about saving time or fuel, it's about securing trade and ensuring economic stability.
The United States of America will not allow communist China or any other country to threaten the canal's operation or integrity.
Each year, hundreds of billions of dollars worth of goods, from electronics to food products, move through this gateway. And much of it, of course, directly benefits American consumers and companies. So, when something as vital as the canal comes under a spotlight, alarm bells go off, especially in Washington. But the twist here isn't about logistics, it's about geopolitics. This brings us to China, a country that has rapidly evolved from being an economic partner to becoming a direct challenger on the global stage. Over the years, China has been splashing cash around the world through its infamous Belt and Road Initiative, funding ports, railways, and highways. But here in Panama, their approach has been strategically quiet, and some might say, brilliantly calculated. China has invested heavily in container terminals and port infrastructure on both sides of the canal. Through debt financing and big flashy projects, they've positioned themselves like a patient chess player setting up their queen. The question is, what's the end game? Picture the canal not as a waterway, but as a highway toll booth. Everyone has to pass through, but not everyone decides what the toll will be. Right now, Panama controls the operation, but with China solidifying its influence, it's as if they're slowly building the infrastructure around the toll booth.
Hegseth claimed that China's control of critical infrastructure in the canal area gave Beijing the power to conduct spying activities across Panama.
And for a player like China, the ability to turn that booth into their own checkpoint during a crisis, whether trade-related or militaristic, would be a huge advantage. This isn't just speculation either. Some experts point to regions like Djibouti, where China's so-called civilian infrastructure projects quietly birthed their first overseas military base. So, what's stopping them from pulling off a similar stunt in Panama down the line? But there's another twist in this modern-day drama. The Panama Canal faces a very literal crisis, a water shortage. It might sound ironic for a canal, but decades of climate change have limited Panama's rainfall, severely affecting the reservoirs that supply the canal's locks. Forget tanks and drones. This is a battle against drought. The lower water levels aren't just a logistical headache. They're reducing the canal's cargo capacity, forcing ships to carry less to avoid running aground. So, while everyone's eyes are on political and military maneuvers, Mother Nature is making her own moves, raising the stakes for whoever wants to control the canal's future. For China, the water shortage presents both an obstacle and an opportunity. From funding water management programs to proposing advanced hydrological technologies, Beijing can further cement its ties with Panama under the guise of environmental cooperation. But the US isn't naive to these ploys. Washington knows that while China writes checks, it's often Panama's sovereignty that pays the bill. And that's why, recently, the buzzword is no longer just diplomacy, it's deterrence.
This apprehension follows remarks made by former President Donald Trump, who suggested that China effectively operates the Panama Canal.
So, where does the US fit into all this? Well, let's just say America isn't known for sitting quietly when its interests are at stake. Southern Flow Shield 2025 might just sound like one of those routine military drills, but it was anything but routine. The US flexed its muscles close to this critical trade route, signaling loud and clear that while China may be laying down chess pieces, America prefers to show up like a linebacker ready to block the entire board. The Panama Canal isn't just about squeezing larger ships through tighter locks anymore. It has become a symbol of economic power, a pawn in environmental crises, and a battleground for influence between superpowers. Some might argue that the canal is caught in a tug of war, but that analogy almost downplays what's really happening. It's not a tug of war when one side is building infrastructure that could double as future launch pads, while the other is mobilizing troops and tech to send warning shots. The US sees this as a critical choke point in global trade, and by extension, its own power. China sees it as an opportunity to do exactly what rising powers always do: challenge the dominant ones. The tug of war might seem local, but the outcomes will ripple far beyond Panama, affecting trade routes, global markets, and political alliances. And trust me, things are just heating up here. Because while China is playing a slow, long game of influence, the US has decided to respond with something more immediate. And that brings us to Southern Flow Shield 2025, America's not-so-subtle way of reminding China, whose military can do what, when, and where. What do you get when the United States military rolls into Panama with drones, helicopters, and radar towers?
The United States has conducted training exercises focused on the defense of the Panama Canal in collaboration with Panama.
The start of Southern Flow Shield 2025, a military exercise that sounds harmless, but makes it pretty clear to the world who's still calling the shots near the Panama Canal. Officially, it was called a capillary security exercise, which is a fancy way of saying they were prepared to fix, protect, or handle anything that might clog up this vital trade artery. Unofficially, it was nothing short of a loud reminder to China: don't get too comfortable near one of the most critical waterways in the world. These weren't your everyday drills. Southern Flow Shield 2025 wasn't about just jogging around in tactical gear or setting up tents. This was full-blown preparation for worst-case scenarios, from protecting infrastructure to dealing with potential threats to the canal's functionality.
U.S. Southern Command deployed 3 helicopters, 2 UH-60 Black Hawk aircraft, and 1 CH-47 Chinook helicopter.
Think of it as a combination rescue mission and Hollywood action sequence, with a little added emphasis on who gets to own the spotlight in global geopolitics. The scene was a spectacle all on its own. Helicopters swept across the skies above Gatun Lake, carrying heavy loads and troops, simulating what would happen if a critical hydraulic system failed. Picture a CH-47 Chinook lowering a spare piston module to a damaged lock as personnel scrambled to install it within minutes. This wasn't a metaphor either. It was happening in real time during the exercise. The whole stage was set to look like a blockbuster, with troops fending off fake saboteurs and radar systems shining down like extra spotlights in the production. And, of course, there was technology in the background doing a lot of the heavy lifting. One of the stars of the show? The MQ-9 Reaper drone, monitoring the situation all the way from Nevada and streaming data live to Panama. The Reaper doesn't exactly tiptoe around. This is a machine built for precision and power. The very kind of tool you'd want if tensions were to rise. It isn't just there to be intimidating, though. Combined with advanced systems that included jamming devices designed to counter cutting-edge military tech, yes, the kind China might use, it was part of a detailed security rehearsal. And boy, was the theater of it hard to ignore. This wasn't just a single performance either. It was a full-scale strategy. Many of the operations during Southern Flow Shield 2025 were about preparing for infrastructure sabotage or emergencies. The US worked with Panamanian authorities as if they were creating the ultimate buddy cop storyline. The idea was straightforward. Practice makes perfect. In this drill, helicopters transported everything from personnel to lightly armored vehicles, responded to emergency scenarios, and operated day and night.
The training included various tactical maneuvers, such as boarding and disembarkation operations, fast rope insertion techniques, rescue crane extraction.
During one simulated mission, American troops even raided a fake sabotage team near an emergency canal line. Those playing the villains here? Contracted personnel from Panama's own Special Intervention Service. Not exactly your local amateur actors. But let's not forget Southern Command, the brains of the operation. Its regional crew from Florida managed everything with precision, coordinating guidance from both the home base and a forward outpost set up near the former headquarters of the U.S. Army South in Panama City. Never let it be said that the American military doesn't know how to run a tight ship, or a tight canal, in this case.
That this drill was aimed at enhancing both nations' capabilities for multinational operations, particularly those related to defending the Panama Canal.
The whole event wasn't without a subtle underline or two aimed at Beijing. China has been circling Panama for years now, both figuratively and financially, pouring money into infrastructure projects and fueling questions about whether they're sticking strictly to civilian investments. Exercises like Southern Flow Shield, with their advanced tactical networks and air dominance technology, were not so subtle signals that when it comes to controlling what happens in and around the canal, America's response is fast, loud, and unmissable.
My administration will be reclaiming the Panama Canal, and we've already started doing it.
Now, there's also the interesting bit about timing. This exercise happened when the Panama Canal was grappling with drought conditions that severely reduced water levels. For the U.S., Southern Flow Shield wasn't only a security exercise, it was also a reassurance. Even if the water situation put stress on canal operations, the message to global onlookers, especially wary companies whose business runs through Panama's transit fees, was clear. The canal's safety wasn't up for debate. Helicopters hovered overhead as men and women in uniform drilled in and around one of the busiest waterways on Earth, a literal demonstration that stability matters, military, environmental, or otherwise. And as much as this exercise was meant to be collaborative, let's not pretend it wasn't also political theater. The US wasn't moving permanent personnel or war-ready heavy weaponry into Panama. That would have violated the country's neutrality agreement. No, this was a brief but deliberate display, one that showed what the American military could do if something went sideways. And yes, it also conveniently highlighted some of those helicopters and other military hardware to potential buyers in the region. Always nice to mix a little business with security demonstrations, isn't it? By the end of Southern Flow Shield 2025, there were no explosions or dramatic missions, just clear messages. China might be setting up ports and inking deals, but the US isn't leaving this chessboard anytime soon.
Defense Pete Hegseth has previously expressed concerns about China's expanding military and economic presence within the Western Hemisphere.
Every radar tower, every simulated repair, and every drone circling Panama said the same thing. Whoever gets a say in this key choke point's future, it's clear whose shadow is still stretching across the canal. But now, we're left asking. Though the US sent a sharp reminder, what happens next in this quiet standoff. Because if you think these drills were the end of the clash over Panama, think again. What does it really mean when China starts setting up shop around the Panama Canal? For one, it's got Washington looking over its shoulder like Panama just got a text from an ex. On paper, China's growing presence in the region looks harmless. Routine trade deals, new infrastructure projects. But dig just a little deeper, and suddenly it feels less like they're being neighborly, and more like they're passing notes to see if Panama's free for dinner on Friday. And if you're looking at this through a global lens, it's pretty clear why the US is anything but relaxed about it.
In the canal area. That gives China the potential to conduct surveillance activities across Panama.
Now, let's talk about these moves China is making. They've got ports on both sides of the canal, which on its own doesn't sound suspicious. But when those ports are operated by massive Chinese companies, the situation feels much less casual. It's like someone showing up to the same coffee shop you go to every day, then buying the tables, the cups, and the espresso machine. Coincidence? Sure. Until that someone is China, and the coffee shop is one of the most critical waterways on Earth. Add to that their funding of canal-adjacent infrastructure, like the Canal Railway and nearby expressways, and you can see the foundation of their strategy. Talented engineers or chess players? This is where things get interesting and mildly nerve-wracking. China has a habit of combining civilian projects with potential military uses, something analysts call security window tactics. Essentially, the shiny new container terminal might just double as a logistics hub if things got hairy down the road. And sure, a railway upgrade or an expressway expansion sounds innocent, but who's to say they don't become fast lanes for something less harmless in the middle of a crisis? It's a classic long game approach. Set the board up, one move at a time, and when the moment's right, you've got all the pieces in the perfect positions. Now here's the kicker. The US knows this playbook all too well. After all, they practically wrote the predecessor edition during their decades of global influence building. Washington is watching China plant its proverbial seeds, and it's not thrilled about what could sprout.
Panama that the United States must take back strategic influence of the Panama Canal from China.
Why? Because almost 5% of global trade flows through the canal daily. That's not just a stat, it's leverage. If the canal ever got blocked or restricted, it wouldn't just be an oops, gotta wait a day for my Amazon package situation, it'd be a global shipping disaster. But back to the ports for a second. With Chinese companies in control, there's a whole lot of logistics data being gathered. How ships move, where they're going, what goods they're carrying. You think about how valuable that intel would be in an international conflict, and it's no wonder Uncle Sam is sweating. Now, this is where the US starts to push back. Southern Flow Shield 2025 sent a pretty clear message that while China can play chess, America can flip the whole board over if it wants to.
Agreed in March to divest its holdings in ports at both ends of the canal to a consortium led by American interests.
2 ports at either end of the canal connecting the Atlantic and Pacific, through which 5% of all global shipping passes.
But the US isn't just stopping at military drills. The counterpunch involves something more strategic. Long-term partnerships, environmental projects, and investments in water management are on the US agenda. Why? Because Panama isn't just dealing with geopolitical tension. It's facing the harsh physical reality of climate change. The canal needs water, lots of it, to run smoothly. But years of reduced rainfall and rising temperatures have left water levels lower than ever. With ships forced to lighten loads or pay extra to cross, the canal's efficiency has taken a hit. Adding to that, if China decides to suddenly become Panama's savior by swooping in with shiny water conservation solutions, they're gonna look like superheroes to the local government. That's exactly the kind of goodwill Washington wants to block, or at least compete with. So now, in addition to helicopters and drones, the US is bringing rainwater catchment systems and environmental aid to the same chessboard. If China's saying, hey, look at this shiny expressway, the US is countering with, Sure, but who's going to keep this canal running when the reservoirs are bone dry? This whole situation has China and the US trading moves like a high-stakes game of Monopoly. But instead of squabbling over Boardwalk, they're vying for influence in Panama. China, ever the clever strategist, plays the long game, port by port, project by project, until the map looks a little too red for Washington's comfort.
Recent photographs released on Monday showcased Panamanian soldiers participating alongside US troops aboard a CH-47 helicopter.
And China are not on the same page. US Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has warned that the United States will not allow China to jeopardize the operations of the Panama Canal.
Meanwhile, the US has been borrowing from its own old playbook, opting for bold interruptions like military demonstrations paired with smoother, longer-term plays like environmental support. It's impossible to ignore the mounting tension. When the Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs clapped back at Southern Flow Shield with a statement calling the canal not anyone's air show arena, you can feel their frustration at how much attention the US is paying their operations. Ironically, that exact frustration is proof of why the US is paying attention. China invests billions and then gets blamed for playing geopolitics. The US sends troops for a short-term exercise and gets accused of military projection.
Amidst rising concerns regarding China's increasing influence in the region.
It's a balancing act where both sides claim the moral high ground while simultaneously shoving each other out of the way. So while China quietly builds its influence, the US keeps flexing in ways that make it clear they're not stepping back between ports, water shortages, and radar-toting Reaper drones. It's become a multi-layered tug of war. The real question isn't just who's winning now, it's what all this means for the canal's future. Will it remain as neutral as Panama promises? Or will it keep drawing in more power plays disguised as goodwill? Because one thing's for sure, this isn't just about trade anymore. It's about control. The Panama Canal has gone from being a marvel of engineering to the centerpiece of a global standoff. With 5% of maritime trade flowing through it daily, that little strip of water now symbolizes something massive: the power struggle between the United States and China. Southern Flow Shield 2025 wasn't just a military exercise, it was a warning shot, a reminder of who's been calling the shots for decades. Meanwhile, China keeps quietly placing its bets, one project at a time. The real question isn't who controls the canal, it's how this clash shapes the future of global influence.